So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I love talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing this new movie, Soap Path. So, let's get into it, shall we? Soap Path is this new film starring Jason Isaacs and Gillian Anderson. Jason Isaacs, which many people might know as the Malfoy father in the Harry Potter films. I've always called now Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies. But he was most recently in The White Lotus Season 3, in which I thought he was great in. And Gillian Anderson, which many people might know from the likes of The X-Files, who's in Sex Education. He's been in loads of things. And those two are the main stars in this movie. And I was interested in seeing this film because I like them two as actors. And also, I was listening to a podcast with Jason Isaacs on not too long ago. Actually, it was the Rob Brydon podcast, the Brydon and podcast. And Jason Isaacs was on there talking about this film and talking about the true story this movie is based on. Like, if you don't know, essentially the story of this film is that a couple lose their home and later discover that the husband has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, so they just decide to walk. They lose everything. The husband, Jason Isaacs' character, gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, and after hitting rock bottom, quite literally after hitting rock bottom, they just decide to walk. That's what they do. They decide to walk and not stop walking. And that was the thing which really got me interested in this movie. It sounded like a very unique true story. And I always like unique true stories that can be inspiring. And the true story to this sounded inspiring. It sounded inspiring the way Jason Isaacs was talking about it on this podcast I was listening to. So with that, I made a note of when this film came out at the cinema, and I decided to go and watch it when it came out at the cinema. I've actually just got back from watching it at the cinema today. And honestly, I thought this was a really good film. It's not without flaws, and I can see why it wouldn't work for some people. It's a movie that leans more on the slow side, so it's not going to be for everyone. But I was swept up by it. I was swept up by the central relationship between the main two characters. I thought that worked brilliantly. I totally believed that Jason Isaacs and Gillian Anderson's characters were a couple who had been married for many, many years. And I believed that they were at this tough crossroads in their lives, but that they were depending on each other to keep going. I totally bought into the movie, and if you don't buy into that, if that didn't work, then I don't think the rest of the film would work. But that does work in the film, and that's what makes the film. That's the glue that really holds the film together. Because if that didn't work, if you didn't buy into the central relationship, then I think most of the film would just fall flat. I mean, yes, sure, the cinematography and the scenery in this film is beautiful, and I mean beautiful with a capital B to look at, but you need that central dynamic to work, and well, it does when you get to this film. And I think that's because of the writing and the small, little subtle details between the two characters, the way they interact with one another. There's a lot of showing and not telling, and I always like that in films. When you have I like that in any sort of medium, when there's a show and not tell, when you're not telling the audience how this couple acts with one another. Instead, you're showing the audience how this couple acts with one another. And there's a lot of that in the film that worked really well for me. And it also works because of the two main performances. This is the best performance I've seen from Jason Isaacs. I never for 1 second felt like I was watching Jason Isaacs. Partly because he doesn't really look like Jason Isaacs usually does. But also because he just... I felt like I was watching this real person, genuinely. I was quite taken by that, because going into the film, that was the main drawing thing for me. That was the main draw for me. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the main drawing thing. That was the main draw for me. I love Jason Isaacs, so I wanted to see him in this film, and I didn't feel like I was watching Jason Isaacs at all. Same with Gillian Anderson, and Gillian Anderson is quite a prolific actor. And the thing is, Jason Isaacs and Gillian Anderson, they're good-looking people, you know? And not to say they're not good-looking in this film, but they also made to look like normal people, ordinary people that you just walk past on the street one day. And I think that also makes that central relationship work more, because if they did look all glamorous and if they did look like movie stars when they came to this film, then I don't think you believe in that central relationship. But because they look like ordinary people, and because they play their roles like they're ordinary people, and they play the roles very authentically, it felt like I can actually believe this is what the real couple that the story is based on acted like when they were at this part of their lives. It made for quite an engaging and emotionally engaging story at that. Plus, the film is beautiful to look at. The scenery is extraordinary. It's really something to behold. Apparently, a lot of the film was shot in Devon, and just the way it looked, though, reminded me of the beaches of Scotland. And I spoke about this in my review of the Ballad of Wallis Island that I reviewed a couple of days ago on this channel. And one of the reasons that I really got engaged in that film is just because of the scenery, and I'm getting to that point in the year now when I'm yearning to go to Scotland. I go to Scotland every year on holiday, and I'm yearning to go. It's getting close to the time that I go to Scotland on holiday, and watching the scene in this film, I'm like, oh god, this just reminds me of Scotland in all the ways I wanted to. I love when a film such as this, in its nature, no pun intended there, but you know, pun, there you go, a bit of a pun, haha, nature. I love the way that a film like this utilises the gorgeousness of the UK. I love the way that a film like this really showcases how extraordinary just the scenery and the places that you could go to in the UK actually are, and this film does that to such a great degree. Furthermore, I love the themes explored in the movie. I loved how this film is really about sticking with somebody no matter what, literally no matter what, because as I said at the start of the film, well, relatively early on in the film, this film is told in flashbacks. The film doesn't start with our main characters losing their home. We're told they lost their home and they basically become homeless in a flashback. But, you know, you see our main characters hit rock bottom early on in the film, and yet they stick with each other no matter what. Jason Isaacs' character throughout the film has his terminal illness, and they keep going back to that, and he plays it well. I believe this character had this terminal illness where he basically couldn't really move one of his arms, and he could barely move his legs, and yet he plays it perfectly, you know. And Jason Isaacs doesn't in real life have this terminal illness, but I believed he did. I believed his character did have a terminal illness in this film, and I loved how this film was about sticking with one another no matter what, through all the heaven and hell that you may go through all sickness and health, which is obviously what they say at weddings, and that really does shine with the central relationship in the film. Again, it's all going back to that central relationship. If that didn't work, then the rest of the film wouldn't work. And then the film also explores how everything you need in life is right around you. You don't need all these materialistic goods, which is kind of rich of me to say. I mean, just look behind me. I've got loads of materialistic goods. I'm a collector. But at the same time, you know, after watching this film, I'm realising most of this that's around me in my bedroom right now isn't actually important. And the most important things in my life are the people that are around me, and everything I need if I want to really feel like I'm going to go on a journey and, you know, find myself is out there in the open. And that's something that I really liked about this film. It's life affirming, you know? It's one of those films which is poignant and gets you thinking and is inspiring. And that's what I wanted from this film. I wanted to come out of it with this feeling of being inspired, and I did. I thought this was a lovely film that had this tender direction to it. I loved the way it was shot. I loved just looking at it. I thought that about 90% of the film, you know, felt real in every single way. I mean, there's about 10% of the film. There's one scene where there's these people who come across our main two characters and mistake Jason Isaacs' character for a famous poet. And that scene, and they invite our main two characters back round to their fancy house, and that scene felt a bit out of place in my opinion. I understand why it was there, and it served a purpose to the narrative, but it still felt a little out of place. That being said, with the exception of a couple of other scenes here and there, most of the film felt real and it felt authentic, and I felt like I was watching these two real life people's journeys through the toughest times of their lives, and yet coming out on the other side. And it is one of those films that you'll watch and you feel like you went on a journey with the characters, and not just on a journey, like you do feel like you're going on this physical journey, doing this walk with these characters, but also this emotional journey, and that's where it really works. It really comes down to that central relationship, and that's why the film worked in my opinion. That's why I got swept up by it. Honestly, the film flew by for me in the cinema. Yeah, I really, really liked it. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that The Soul Path, I'm going to say that I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, Again, it has its flaws. I'm not going to sit here and say it's one of the films of the year. It didn't have the same effect on me as, say, the Ballad of Wallace Island did, which I reviewed a couple of days ago on this channel, but it did have an effect on me. I did come out of the cinema feeling like I've just said, that I went on this emotional and physical journey with these characters. And that is what you want from a film like this, from a journey film. And this film, it works very well in that way. And again, it's all going back to that central relationship. It's a love story at the end of the day, which is one thing I'm surprised I haven't mentioned yet. But I remember to mention just before the end of this review, it's a love story at the end of the day, and that is what shines through. It's a love story about sticking with somebody no matter what, and embracing those around you in the toughest of times. And for me, because it focused on those things, and it focused on the gorgeous, and I mean gorgeous with the capital G, scenery of the UK, I could not help but get swept up by this film. Yeah, I really, really liked it. And so, all in all, as what he said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Soap Path, is it called The Soap Path, or is it called Soap Path? It is, in fact, called The Soap Path. The Soap Path is an 8 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen The Soap Path, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts and many more videos coming very, very soon on this channel. As what he said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.